Okay, take one.
Are you ready?
Rolling.
Oh, we're rolling. All right. Hi, everyone. Pastor Craig here. And as you know, on June 10th at our church conference, and all the members of our church are going to be asked about voting on whether or not our church should be used for same-sex weddings and whether or not we should receive members of the LGBT community as candidates for ministry and as appointed pastors. Now, oftentimes I'm asked on this topic, why is it so important that our church make a decision on this matter? Well, a lot of it has to do with how our denomination is making a decision on this matter. United Methodists have been arguing about this very topic of human sexuality for 40 years. Back in the early 1970s, language was placed in our Book of Discipline that was prohibitive against individuals from the LGBTQ community. And so we've been arguing about this ever since. This argument really came to a head at our general conference in 2016. The United Methodist Church meets every 4 years to work on its denominational positions on different topics, including same-sex marriage. And in 2016, it became clear that the denomination had reached an impasse. There were individuals in the life of the church that felt that same-sex marriage should be prohibited. There were others who felt like it was well beyond time for it to be allowed in their local churches. In response to this, the General Conference approved the Council of Bishops to form a commission that would come to them with several proposals about what we could do going forward as a denomination. The commission was called a Commission on the Way Forward, and their work was to bring a set of recommendations back to the Council of Bishops about what we could do as a denomination to move past this long-standing argument we've been having for decades. The commission brought 3 recommendations to the Council of Bishops just a couple of months ago. The Council of Bishops processed those recommendations and are bringing all 3 of those recommendations to a special general conference in February of 2019. Now, these 3 proposals that the Council of Bishops are forwarding are very important and will affect the life of First Church in every regard. So let me outline them to you very quickly and how I think they're going to play out. The first proposal is called the Traditionalist Plan. And the Traditionalist Plan basically leaves the Book of Discipline of the United Methodist Church exactly the way it's been. So it changes nothing about the language prohibiting LGBTQ people from being ordained or appointed to serve local churches, and about same-sex marriages. The prohibitions against that continues. The difficulty with the Traditionalist Plan is that's what we've voted on in 2016 and 2012, 2008, going backwards every 4 years, and we've endorsed that. The difficulty with the Traditionalist Plan is that there are many of our regional bodies, which are called annual conferences, that function in flat-out defiance of that language in the Book of Discipline. Our annual conference, the California Pacific Annual Conference, along with all of the annual conferences in the Western jurisdiction of the church, have operated in open defiance of this prohibitive language in the Book of Discipline for years. All of the clergy of First Church who are appointed here, all 4 of us, disagree with the Book of Discipline and have made clear that we believe the time has come for the full inclusion of LGBTQ people into the life of the church. Under the Traditionalist Plan, and this is just speculation on my part, but in the Traditionalist Plan, if it's approved in February of 2019, the denomination will likely see a schism, with annual conferences voting en masse to leave the United Methodist Church to form a new Wesleyan or Methodist denomination. This would be the most unfortunate outcome because a schism in the church along the lines of human sexuality really helps no one. Our annual conference has consistently voted for decades to be in favor of same-sex marriage, to be in favor of accepting LGBTQ people into the life of the church, and so it's quite clear where this annual conference is going to go if we're forced into a vote of that sort. A vast majority of the delegates to annual conference have consistently voted in line with removing this prohibitive language in the Traditionalist Plan. Now, there's a second plan, and that is called the One Church Plan. And out of the 3 plans the Council is bringing, that plan is the one endorsed by the Council of Bishops. And what this would do is the One Church Plan would allow the United Methodist Church to remain one denomination, But different bodies, locally and regionally, could make their own decisions on this issue of human sexuality. So if the one church plan were to pass at General Conference next year, it's a foregone conclusion that the United Methodist Churches of the Western Jurisdiction, voting as an annual conference, would vote to allow same-sex weddings. They would vote to allow to receive LGBTQ people as candidates for ministry and to be ordained. So in the one church plan, every locality or region would be allowed to make their own decisions on this topic, of which our annual conference, being one of the most progressive annual conferences in the denomination, would certainly vote in favor of same-sex weddings. Now, the third and final proposal is called the Connectional Conference Proposal. Now, this one is a bit unusual. The best way I can describe it is think about the Anglican Communion, the Church of England. The Anglican Communion is made up of a whole host of different denominations that are self-governing. In other words, they have their own systems of control and polity, but they exist as part of a larger umbrella. And in the Connectional Conference Proposal, we would have one Methodist umbrella, or connection, if you will, made up of different conferences within it that are all kind of self-governing, making up their own minds, maybe each with their own book of discipline, their own polity, and their own structure. In the Connectional Conference Proposal, which is the third of the three, it's quite clear where this annual conference will fall in line with that plan. They will consistently vote that same-sex weddings should happen in our churches, and that LGBTQ people should be accepted as candidates for ministry and or appointed to our churches. I walk you through all three of these plans so that you can understand, to some degree from my standpoint, what the outcome of any of these three will be. When it comes to First Church, it's not really a matter of if we will have a same-sex wedding in our sanctuary. It's really a matter of when we will have a same-sex wedding in our sanctuary and how we will have one. Will we have one of our own choosing, by our own choice, by our own will to decide what the future of our church will be on our own? Or will we wait passively for the denomination to decide for us? And when that decision is made, we will then simply have to move along with the plan as defined for us. Now, there's a very, very slight likelihood that in all possibility, this church may choose to do something on its own at some point in the future. And that might be the case. The church may decide that they don't want to align with the rest of the churches of the annual conference, and perhaps there'll be an option to do that. But I would say to you that option is unlikely on a number of different levels. Our church is the flagship church of the annual conference. It's quite unlikely that this church would be allowed to do something different than what the other churches of the conference would be willing to do. So that more or less outlines the case that I think is important for us to consider this question on June 10th, about whether or not we're going to concur with the church council recommendation to allow same-sex weddings in our sanctuary. The question is being put before us. The time for us to decide as a church is now, rather than to passively wait for the denomination to decide, and we're simply left to pick up the pieces. Speaking on behalf of the pastors and other leaders, we think a better approach is to be intentional as a church about this question and to work through it in the days that are to come to help our church move through this season of change and transition. So if you have any questions about this, feel free to ask me, ask any of our pastors. We're happy to talk about it with you. God bless you, and may God's Spirit be with you as you proceed to the church conference on June 10.